avoid the misery from which they see no other means of escape. But far more demoralizing than his poverty and its influence upon the English working man is the insecurity of his position, the necessity of living upon wages from hand to mouth, that in short which makes a proletarian of him. The smaller peasants in Germany are usually poor, and often suffer want, but they are less at the mercy of accident, they have at least something secure. The proletarian, who has nothing but his two hands, who consumes today what he earned yesterday, who is subject to every possible chance, and has not the slightest guarantee for being able to earn the barest necessities of life, whom every crisis, every whim of his employer may deprive of bread, this proletarian is placed in the most revolting, inhuman position conceivable for a human being. The slave is assured of a bare livelihood by the self-interest of his master, the serf has at least a scrap of land on which to live, each has at worst a guarantee for life itself. But the proletarian must depend upon himself alone, and is yet prevented from so applying his abilities as to be able to rely upon them. Everything that the proletarian can do to improve his position is but a drop in the ocean, compared with the floods of varying chances to which he is exposed, over which he has not the slightest control. He is the passive subject of all possible combinations of circumstances, and must count himself fortunate when he has saved his life even for a short time, and his character and way of living are naturally shaped by these conditions. Either he seeks to keep his head above water in this whirlpool, to rescue his manhood, and this he can do solely in Rebellion 116 against the class which plunders him so mercilessly, and then abandons him to his fate, which strives to hold him in this position, so demoralizing to a human being, or he gives up the struggle against his fate as hopeless, and strives to profit, so far as he can, by the most favorable moment. To save is unavailing, for at the utmost he cannot save more than suffices to sustain life for a short time, while if he falls out of work, it is for no brief period. To accumulate lasting property for himself is impossible, and if it were not, he would only cease to be a working man and another would take his place. What better thing can he do, then, when he gets high wages, than live well upon them? The English bourgeoisie is violently scandalized at the extravagant living of the workers when wages are high, yet it is not only very natural, but very sensible of them to enjoy life when they can, instead of laying up treasures which are of no lasting use to them, and which in the end moth and rust the bourgeoisie get possession of. Yet such a life is demoralizing beyond all others. What Carlyle says of the cotton spinners is true of all English industrial workers 117a. Their trade, now in plethoric prosperity, anon extenuated into inanition and short time, is of the nature of gambling. They live by it like gamblers, now in luxurious superfluity, now in starvation. Black, mutinous discontent devours them, simply the miserablest feeling that can inhabit the heart of man. English commerce, with its worldwide convulsive fluctuations, with its immeasurable produce steam demon, makes all paths uncertain for them, all life a bewilderment, society, steadfastness, peaceable continuance, the first blessings of man are not fees. This world is for them no home, but a dingy prison house, of reckless unthrift, rebellion, rancor, indignation against themselves, and against all men. Is it a green flowery world, with azure everlasting sky stretched over it, the work and government of a god, or a murky, simmering tophet, of copperous fumes, cotton fuzz, gin riot, wrath and toil, created by a demon, governed by a demon? And elsewhere 117b. Injustice, infidelity to truth and fact and nature's order, being properly the one evil under the sun, and the feeling of injustice the one intolerable pain under the sun, our grand question as to the condition of these working men would be: is it just? And, first of all, what belief have they themselves formed about the justice of it? The words they promulgate are notable by way of answer, their actions are still more notable. Revolt, sullen, revengeful humor of revolt against the upper classes, decreasing respect for what their temporal superiors command, decreasing faith for what their spiritual superiors teach, is more and more the universal spirit of the lower classes. Such spirit may be blamed, may be vindicated, but all men must recognize it as extant there, all may know that it is mournful, that unless altered it will be fatal. Carlyle is perfectly right as to the facts and wrong, only in censuring the wild rage of the workers against the higher classes. This rage, this passion, is rather the proof that the workers feel the inhumanity of their position, that they refuse to be degraded to the level of brutes, and that they will one day free themselves from servitude to the bourgeoisie. This may be seen in the case of those who do not share this wrath. They either bow humbly before the fate that overtakes them, live a respectful private life as well as they can, do not concern themselves as to the course of public affairs, help the bourgeoisie to forge the chains of the workers yet more securely, and stand upon the plane of intellectual nullity that prevailed before the industrial period began, or they are tossed about by fate, lose their moral hold upon themselves as they have already lost their economic hold, live along from day to day, drink and fall into licentiousness, and in both cases they are brutes. The last named class contributes chiefly to the rapid increase of vice, at which the bourgeoisie is so horrified after itself setting in motion the causes which give rise to it. Another source of demoralization among the workers is their being condemned to work. As voluntary, productive activity is the highest enjoyment known to us, so is compulsory toil the most cruel, degrading punishment. Nothing is more terrible than being constrained to do some one thing every day from morning until night against one's will. And the more a man the worker feels himself, the more hateful must his work be to him, because he feels the constraint, the aimlessness of it for himself. Why does he work? For love of work? From a natural impulse? Not at all. He works for money, for a thing which has nothing whatsoever to do with the work itself, and he works so long, moreover, and in such unbroken monotony, that this alone must make his work a torture in the first weeks, if he has the least human feeling left. The division of labor has multiplied the brutalizing influences of forced work. In most branches the worker's activity is reduced to some paltry, purely mechanical manipulation, repeated minute after minute, unchanged year after year. 119 How much human feeling, what abilities can a man retain in his 30th year, who has made needle points, or filed toothed wheels 12 hours every day from his early childhood, living all the time under the conditions forced upon the English proletarian? It is still the same thing, since the introduction of steam. The worker's activity is made easy, muscular effort is saved, but the work itself becomes unmeaning, and monotonous to the last degree. It offers no field for mental activity, and claims just enough of his attention, to keep him from thinking of anything else. And a sentence to such work, to work which takes his whole time for itself, leaving him scarcely time to eat and sleep, none for physical exercise in the open air, or the enjoyment of nature, much less for mental activity, how can such a sentence help degrading a human being to the level of a brute? Once more the worker must choose, must either surrender himself to his fate, become a good workman, heed faithfully the interest of the bourgeoisie, in which case he most certainly becomes a brute, or else he must rebel, fight for his manhood to the last, and this he can only do in the fight against the bourgeoisie. And when all these conditions have engendered vast demoralization among the workers, a new influence is added to the old, to spread this degradation more widely, and carry it to the extremest point. This influences the centralization of the population. The writers of the English bourgeoisie are crying murder at the demoralizing tendency of the great cities. Like perverted Jeremiahs, they sing dirges, not over the destruction, but the growth of the cities. Sheriff Allison attributes almost everything, and Dr. Vaughan, author of The Age of Great Cities, still more to this influence. And this is natural, for the propertied class has too direct an interest in the other conditions which tend to destroy the worker body and soul. If they should admit that poverty, insecurity, overwork, forced work, are the chief ruinous influences, they would have to draw the conclusion, then let us give the poor property, guarantee their subsistence, make laws against overwork, and this the bourgeoisie dare not formulate. But the great cities have grown up so spontaneously, the population has moved into them so wholly of its own motion, and the inference that manufacture and the middle class which profits from it alone have created the cities is so remote, that it is extremely convenient for the ruling class to ascribe all the evil to this apparently unavoidable source, whereas the great cities really only secure a more rapid and certain development for evils already existing in the germ. Allison is humane enough to admit this. He is no thoroughbred liberal manufacturer, but only a half-developed Tory bourgeois, and he has, therefore, an open eye, now and then, where the full-fledged bourgeois is still stone-blind. Let us hear him. 120. It is in the great cities that vice has spread her temptations, and pleasure her seductions, and folly her allurements, that guilt is encouraged by the hope of impunity, and idleness fostered by the frequency of example. It is to these great marts of human corruption that the bass and the profligate resort from the simplicity of country life. It is here that they find victims